Hello and welcome to Bookworms. It's the show where we read books and talk about those books. I'm your host, Alex.
And I'm Joe.
We have a very special guest with us today. He's a author, a podcaster, and an all-around great guy. It's Troy Farkas.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you. It's still surreal to me to hear author, especially that be the first thing that you say. That's very surreal. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, it's your authorship that brings us here today.
Yeah.
So.
How about that?
Yeah, if it was just the podcast, we would be like,
Yeah,
who's that guy?
That
Who
wouldn't be
cares?
important enough. I know, I get it. This is the thing that brings the real attention now. I'm ready.
Yeah, if it was about podcasting, it'd just be more like, please give us advice.
Yeah.
We need all the help we can get.
No, you guys are doing great. I'm excited to be here.
So, you wrote a book, a self-help book called Surrender, a guide to living your best life in your 20s. Tell us, why you write this book?
So I've always wanted to write a book. I love writing. I grew up in a family of media people. My mom and dad are newspaper writers and editors. They met at a newspaper in California way back when. So the media thing kind of always been in the blood. And so I grew up writing. I grew up writing love letters, letters to my friends, postcards, thank you notes, which then became, journal entries and blogs online for people to see. I have a Substack that I've been doing for a couple years. I've gone in and outs of periods of keeping the writing to myself, whether it's some type of creative writing, making up a story, and then also just like releasing it to the world as well. And so with this love of writing, which has always kind of been an escape for me, a creative outlet for me, a place where I can really let my thoughts and feelings go. It's a great way for me to channel that energy, especially when I'm going through something, when I'm emotionally writing. That's when I'm at my best. And so with this talent, which people have told me that I've had, I always said, I would love to write a book one day. And so I've made that a professional goal of mine. I've only ever have had 3 professional goals, and I've now accomplished 2 of them. The second of them was writing a book. And
What's the third one, just so?
owning a coffee shop. The first one was producing a documentary, which I did when I worked at ESPN a couple years ago.
Nice.
And so I'd always wanted to write a book, and then this book in particular, I'm obsessed with becoming the best version of myself. It's a question I think about endlessly. We have this one precious life. We're only on this earth for such a short time in comparison to the grand scheme of the earth's existence. We are just a speck of dust. And so I'm obsessed with, how do I make some type of impact for the very, very short time while I'm here? And I think there's a lot of people on this earth right now who don't realize that. They act as if they have all the time in the world. They act as if they're going to be here forever. And so they live a very unintentional life, an unfulfilled life, very ordinary life. And I want people to live extraordinary lives. And so that's why I spent years gathering this information from books, from podcasts, from philosophy, from traveling the world, from experience, from conversations. And I put a lot of that into this book. And I targeted young people especially because I am one, and I think a lot of young people have all the opportunity in the world to be successful, more so than they ever have before. But I think a lot of us are squandering it away. So I wanted to get at those people.
Yeah, you're definitely on the younger side. Me and Alex are both in our 30s now, bitter old millennials. And I think you're right on that edge of millennial Zoom.
Yeah. I identify with Gen Z, though.
Okay, yeah. I kind of figured.
Self-identify.
Yeah, when I was doing my research on you, I kind of like, that's kind of the vibe I'm feeling off you. But with all the self-help books out there, there's I'm assuming hundreds. It's not typically
big genre.
Yeah, typically a genre I read very often, if ever. Why are you the best voice for your generation, you think?
Starting with the easy questions.
Yeah, that's a great question. No one's asked me that yet. I think I've had several people tell me as I've gone about my career so far. I've worked at ESPN and Spotify, 2 world leaders in their respective spaces, and I've ran into high up people at those companies, and they've said to me, "You're different. You don't think or speak or act the way that most people your age do. You carry yourself differently." And so I've kind of, not in a cocky way, but I've carried myself the last couple of years thinking, you know what, maybe I am different. Maybe I do view the world and move about it in a way that most young people don't. I'm very self-aware, and I'm aware of the long-term scope of things. And so I've just spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I was like, you know what? not enough young people are out here saying these things. I want to be a voice to, I want to be the voice using my skills of writing, of communicating, of writing succinctly and directly. In this specific case, I wrote this for the short attention span, because God knows our attention spans are only getting shorter. And so I think I'm the guy, because I'm one of the only few young people who's had enough experience in his 20s to write a book about it, coming from an informed and passionate place with my writing style. I thought I was the right guy to write something like this.
Yeah, and I really did, to heap some praise on you, I did enjoy your writing style. It's very, word to describe it, is it's very like, this is working for me, I hope it works for you, or you can try it, but you also leave a lot like up to interpretation for the reader. Like you have those list of values to choose from.
Yeah.
You have different ways of analyzing your writing, so I found that to be very approachable, a nice style, and you kind of make room for when you like contradictory things, because
Yes.
like you said in the very beginning, like life is a contradictory thing and it can be chaotic, and you got to find out how to make your values align. And I just want to say I appreciated that.
Thank you, and I appreciate you noticing that. There is no one template that we should all follow. We're all different. We all have different backgrounds. We were all raised differently. We all come from different parts of the country or of the world. And so some of this advice people can take and try it out, and it just won't work for them. For me, meditation's been beaten down on me for years. I've just never been able to get it. So I'm not going to force myself if it's just not something that's working for me. It works for so many people around the world, and I understand it's a great tactic, and all the best in the world to those people that do that. It's not for me. And a lot of this stuff, it might just not be for you, but that's totally fine. We're all different.
Yeah, you did say in your book that a lot of your essays are contradictory to each other. And that was kind of intentional, just to kind of cover. Yeah.
Well, because I think, so with the contradictory nature of it, I was trying to be symbolic of what your 20s are really like. I can't tell you the number of times that me in my own life and my friends one day are like, you know what? I want to get up and leave and start anew and move to a new place, new job, and dump my girlfriend. And then literally the next day are like, you know what? I really like it here. I can see myself buying a house here for the next 10 years and being happy. Our minds change all the time because we're still figuring out who we are, what we want out of life. And especially, I'm trying to ask or tell people to be self-reflective, to take stock of where you are in your life. Is this where you want to be? Are you surrounded by the people you want to be surrounded by? Are you doing the things that you want to do? Are you leading a life of purpose and meaning? Are you doing what you're truly meant to do? Or are you just kind of coasting? And so I just want to beat people over the heads and to know that in your 20s, this is like the most important time for habit building and for setting the direction of your life. This is the foundation. If you want to start exercising at age 22, you've never done it before, it's a lot easier for you to do that than if you decide at age 42, if you've never exercised before, that you want to get into it right now. So I'm just trying to open people up to a lot of different things that you can or should be doing in your life to get the most out of it.
A lot of times I felt you almost had a kind of a cynical look at things. It kind of comes out in the title, Surrender. But a lot of times, at least to me, as a bitter old millennial who's very cynical anyways, that was something, a running theme that kept popping back in.
Yeah.
Was that intentional or something that you were unaware of? Or
Yes, that is intentional. There's this thing called, and we just love adding the word toxic to everything now. It's something that Gen Z does. Toxic optimism, where you can be so optimistic to the point that you're delusional and that you are depriving yourself of the reality of the situation. And so I would love to see the best in people. I would love to think that everyone has the best intentions. I would love to think that my friends and my family and my loved ones are always going to come through for me, that they're always going to be there for me, that they're always going to show up. The reality is they're not. I've been screwed over so many times in my life. So I kind of approach life like I know I can count on myself. I know I'm going to show up. I can't necessarily say that for everyone else. In the book, I talk about raising your standards and lowering your expectations. Raise your standards for yourself. Don't ever stoop to the ways that other people move about their lives. Don't be like them. But drop your expectations for other people. Don't expect them to come through for you, because if they fail to, then, and you have low expectations, well, when they don't come to your birthday party, you're like not that butthurt by it. because you just expect people to not come through for you. That's what human nature is. We are all self-serving. We are all in survival mode at the end of the day, looking out for ourselves, like our ancestors trying to get the most food for them and their immediate tribe, right? That's what it all comes back to. So there are a few passages, or there are a few areas in my life where I am cynical about, and I think being too, whatever the opposite of cynical is, being too optimistic is kind of not a great thing.
Yeah, and that's something I kind of wish I'd read back when I was like 22.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I'm not entitled to anything, but I also, I don't owe things to other people.
Yeah.
And just we coexist, we help each other when we can, but in the end, it's kind of down to you to decide where you go with it.
Exactly.
Have you ever read Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink?
No.
I highly recommend it. It's a self-help book
Yeah.
about basically taking
Jocko.
taking all the responsibility on yourself. It's his first book that he published. Highly recommend it. So
Okay.
definitely check it out if you ever get there.
Yeah, I like Jocko.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, I love his podcast. So
Yeah, it's a good one.
yeah. One of the essays that really brought me in was the one titled "Grudges."
Oh, it's one of my favorites.
You can tell definitely the way you wrote it. I was wondering if you could dig a little deeper into it. I don't know if you said you worked at ESPN. Do you ever interview or meet Kobe, or what did his death change for you? What grudges were you able to let go, or connections you reached out to try to fix?
Yeah, so Kobe Bryant's untimely death at the beginning of 2020 was really just a reminder to me of how precious life is. And it brought me directly back to a moment in my life in 2012. I've actually dedicated the book to a girl named Deanna Rivers. She was my best friend, and where I grew up in upstate New York. And she was killed in a car accident by a drunk, high, speeding, texting driver on his way to get more drugs on a Saturday night at like 11 p.m. Back in 2012. And I never got to tell her one more time how much I loved her, how much she meant to me, how much her friendship meant to me. Before she died, in the weeks leading up to it, we were kind of in like a mini squabble. We weren't really talking to each other. We were fighting over something petty that high schoolers fight about and give each other the cold shoulder for. It didn't matter. Looking back on it, it's my biggest regret that we didn't patch that up, because I now have to live with for the rest of my life knowing that me and my best friend, who's no longer with us, ended on not the greatest terms. So that's why I leave every conversation with people that I love, whether that's on the phone or in person. I leave that conversation knowing this could be the last time I ever see you. This could be the last time I ever talk to you, that I'm ever in your presence. So I'm going to make it count, and I'm going to tell you I love you. Like, if you're a woman, I'll do that more so with women. Men, I'll do like a nice bro hug or a firm handshake or something, or like I appreciate you, something like that. Just some type of transfer or acknowledgement of letting you know that I care about you and that I hear you, because I want you to know that. Because if you're gone tomorrow, I want you to, I want to look back fondly upon our final interaction, which I don't with Deanna. So fast forward to 2020, that it hit right back home, that lesson when Kobe died. Like, Kobe and Vanessa, his wife, who knows what their final conversation was like. Maybe they were in a fight or something, or who knows what. Like, Kobe, like Michael Jordan, very competitive, a lot of grudges with people. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that he held grudges with that would love to have not had those grudges. So I don't believe in grudges. I work with some people who are big grudge holders, and they want me to inherit their beefs out of a sign of loyalty to them. And that's just not my philosophy. That's never going to be my philosophy. I'm all about love and spreading kindness, and our time is short here on this earth. Let's make it count. Let's grow up and get past the grudges. I don't believe in them. They're stupid, because if that person that you have a grudge with, if they go tomorrow, it's going to suck that you're going to have to live with that for the rest of your life, knowing that you acted like such a coward or like such a child holding on to this thing that didn't matter.
Now, I've reached an age where there are like I try not to hold grudges, but there's like people I probably would not help if I had the chance. I'm sure there's that aspect as well. Like, it's important to express your feelings towards people, but are there also people that maybe it's whatever?
Yeah, there's definitely I don't believe in completely cutting people out of your life. I have some people in my life that I'm close with that get mad at me for not cutting out certain people of my life. What I will do if they're in my primary circle and they screw me over, or I just realize, you know what, this friendship just isn't what I would like it to be, or it's a thing of the past, or this isn't going to be a good thing for the future, I'll move them back to the secondary or the tertiary circles. Rather than let's hang out once a month, it'll be like, hey, let's do a phone call every couple of months. Like, if you're in town, great. If I'm in town, great. Let's get together. But we're not knowing the day-to-day of each other's lives. So I don't believe in completely booting people out, but I do believe in, if it makes sense, downgrading someone's importance in your life if they don't hold the relationship in the regard that they should.
So, Alex, I've been kind of dominating the questions here. You have anything? I know you want Troy self-published this book, and we're very curious about that, as Alex has tried self-publishing a few times. And
yeah, I've had some experience with self-publishing, like through Amazon. I just wanted to learn, like, what was your, like, you wrote the book, and I mean, naturally, like, you want to share it with people. You can try, you know, going through mainstream publishing. It's, you know, they take care of everything for you, like on the marketing aspect, but the breaking into that market is incredibly difficult. I was wondering if that was like your first goal, or if you just wanted to, you know, just get it out there right away with the self-publishing. What was that like? How did you handle things like editing and marketing that publishing companies usually help you out with?
Yeah, it's a good question. I never really seriously considered going the traditional publishing route. Most importantly because, like I said, publishing a book has been my dream. I've always wanted to do it. I didn't want to... Honestly, I didn't want to get rejected by the big 5 publishing houses and never accomplish my dream. And I'm very much a self-motivated, like, self-starter. So I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to take this into my own hands and control my own destiny. I know it's probably a bigger bang for your buck if you do go with a publisher, but I get way more control this way. I get more of the royalties this way. Now, yes, there will be obviously way fewer sales, but that's fine. I'm writing this first book just to get it out, to prove to myself that I can do it, to go through the process, like, in completely nuts to bolts and just learn what it's all about. I wanted to get in the nitty-gritty of all of it, start to finish, so that if there's a second book, which there will be, so that I could really know what to expect. And honestly, it wasn't as difficult as I thought. Self-publishing, I luckily, so in the self-help space, there's a couple people that I look up to, and I've read their books for a number of years, and I actually just hit up the guy that I knew that self-published those books, and he actually just happened to have like a couple months in his calendar where he could take on an additional project. His name is Sean. He lives out in Los Angeles, has helped self-publish some like really high-performing, well-known books in this space. And so I inked a deal with him, went back and forth. It wasn't too difficult. And then, yeah, we just shared a Google document, shared my Google Doc with him, left a bunch of notes. We, went through edits and maybe like 4 or 5 rounds of edits together. Then he formatted it lovely. I checked through that again just to make sure. It was a very collaborative process. I'm a pretty hands-on person. And then we went back and forth on a book cover. And then once I had all the files, the e-book, the standard book, and the corresponding book covers, like, just upload to KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, Barnes & Noble, and Apple Books, and all the other ones. It was a really fun process. And, like, when the book got released on August 19th, people ordered it that day and had it August 21st. It was crazy that... And, like, I'm really proud of how the book feels, of how it looks. It looks professional. It exceeded my expectations, and it got to people really quickly. It's what a crazy, like, world this is.
So sales have been better than you had thought or initially they would be, or they kind of what you expected, or...
So, as part for, like, my life philosophy, always having low expectations, I went into it having very low expectations. My goal here is just to write the book. I'm a perfectionist. I was never going to be completely happy with it, but I eventually just reached a point where I was like, you know what? This is a good stopping point. This is my first book. Your first is going to be the worst. Your first album is probably your worst. Your first anything time you do it is going to be the worst. It's going to be a great learning experience. So I don't think this is my best book, and I know I probably shouldn't be saying that, but it's, I'm hoping like my 7th book will be great. And then the people who, when the 7th book gets big, they'll go back to the first one and they'll be like, oh, cool. I didn't even know this existed. So the sales have been just about what I expected. just like, yeah, they've been just about what I expected. Not like blown away by it, but again, that was never like the goal. The goal was just to get these messages out there, to prove to myself that I could do it. And also I need to remind myself, like, this book now exists forever. It can be bought at any time. It's not like you just have a 2-month sale window and then it's never going to get bought again. Like, this is just the beginning.
Yeah, and the cool thing with self-publishing too is, like, if you want to make changes to the book, you can just go in, make the changes, hit resubmit, and it's available again.
Yeah, I can just like rewrite it like Taylor Swift rewrites her old albums and like breaks records doing that.
Yeah.
What successes in this process do you think you had, and were there any failures that you are learning from that during this self-publishing process?
So that's a good question. Successes from the process, getting it out on time, getting it professionally done. I'm coming from a family of writers and editors. I'm a stickler for good punctuation and sentence structure. I combed over this thing so many times to make sure there were no errors. There's not a single error in there. Meanwhile, I have like a running joke with my family whenever I'm reading a book from like a traditional publishing house that's a really big book that's on the bestseller list. And I'm like, there's 18 errors in this book. How did this get through? So the fact that my book is error-free is something that I take a great amount of pride in.
Yeah, my publishing process, I'm terrible at finding errors. So
Oh, really?
I went out like almost a year ago, and I was rereading through it, and I'm like, just finding like one on every page. I'm like,
Oh, really?
That's why I got that idea for like, oh, you can just fix it and resubmit it. So it was like,
So are you your own writer and editor?
yep, yeah,
Yeah.
This guy edits for me too sometimes.
Okay,
but,
yeah.
yeah. It's just like they go drafting and drafting, drafting. You think you have it, then you put it out, then you're like, you look back at it, and I'm like, oh, I missed all this
Yeah.
stuff.
So I wrote it and went through my own edits 4 or 5 times through the book and got it to a place where I was comfortable not to publish, but to hand it off to someone else, whether it's in my own podcast or my own writing. Whenever I have the opportunity to let someone else take a look or do the editing, I do. Because even though I know I'm good at that stuff, you have an emotional attachment to the words that you write or to the words that you speak in a podcast. So if there's something wrong with it, or if it doesn't really make sense, like, you know what you mean, but maybe the audience doesn't know what you mean. So for you, I would just recommend just to have someone else take a look at it whenever you can, because you can't necessarily see your own errors or your own poor
Someone other
writing.
than Joe.
Yeah, exactly. We just
Yeah,
got you a job.
Yeah. I usually go
I'm,
with
I'm
the-
not doing the line by line, Alex.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
you don't
Usually
pay me
abide
enough
by
for
the,
that.
like the Stephen King method of like two drafts and a polish, but I'm also not on his level.
Yeah.
But
Not yet.
yeah, I'm still working on it. I've been writing for a long time now. But it's just
What kind of
it's-
writing?
Was that?
What kind?
I love writing fiction. So,
Nice.
Yeah, I've put out like 5 on Amazon now. I feel like I have one good one finally. But,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not a fiction person at all. I don't really read it, and I can't really contrive how people write it. How do you get yourself into the mindset to write a fiction book? What is the creative process for that like?
Well, I mean, like, creative it changes like from book to book. I just I have like a seed of an idea, and you just kind of pluck it out and you just nourish it. So my most recent one was actually a middle grade fiction about. I had this idea kicking around for like years because a friend of ours went down to Honduras to mine gold. So I had this like whole idea of like a possible story where like it's like the Mummy style, where they go and they like unearth some sort of monster. And then I somehow managed to tie that into a different passion of mine, which is Norse mythology.
Of
and
course.
so it's this. It's about a 12-year-old boy who goes to Honduras, finds the tree of life there, and then winds up in this whole adventure to stop the Norse apocalypse, which
Kind of reminds me of The Alchemist a little bit.
yeah, a little bit. I was trying to I don't know, avoid like the Percy Jackson references, but it was a lot of fun. It took a number of years to write it out, just like plan everything, because you got your main character who's got this main conflict, but you also need to have subplots and introduce new characters who all have their own storylines that need to tie together. So it's a long process, and a lot of my ideas just came from like, oh, this would be a funny joke to put into the book, and then just tell a joke and then make it work with the story. And you just go back, you edit it, you have your brother give you notes. And
I always assume that just all fiction writers just like get really high or go on some type of weird drugs to get in that mindset.
I don't know. For me, I'm not published by any stretch, but I do a lot of fiction writing myself and trying to get to that stage where I'm ready to publish.
What's stopping you?
Just trying to get it polished enough to put out there. I am currently trying to find an agent because I want to go the more traditional route because doing the self-publishing thing seems more work than I'm willing to put in outside of the writing.
Yeah.
I just want to be able to write, not have to do as much of the marketing side of it. But the finding a agent is hard as you know anyways, and Alex knows. But for me, my process is watching the book in my head like a movie, and just writing it down as fast as I can. And then going back later and polishing it up multiple times. But I've always had a really active imagination. I can go to these just strange, dark worlds and revisit them when I want to. And that's just reading so much fantasy and science fiction throughout my life. Just piling those ideas on, reading other more literary fiction, understanding where these authors I love, where they're getting their ideas from, and be like, okay, I'm making those connections, and how can I now tie all that into my stories to make it more meaningful and not just this is a fun adventure story, and have actual messages hidden deep into it. So that's kind of my process. But
that's awesome.
Yeah. Another thing for me is I got to know when to bail on an idea. It's like
it's hard.
Long form fiction, like you have this great starting moment, but then like you just hit that wall, and you got to put it down and walk away from it. It's like otherwise you're going to be trying to push stuff that's not there, and it's going to hurt the quality of the book in the end. And never get rid of it entirely. It's always going to be something you can come back to. Like I said, that Apocalypse book was an idea that I had, years before I even wrote the first word, but I couldn't figure that out, so I walked away from it, and then eventually something clicked, and I was able to get there. So just know when to stop and focus on something else. Otherwise, you're just gonna kind of be spinning your tires the whole time.
Yeah, good problem to have, though.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the publishing side of things, Alex?
You want to talk marketing a little? I didn't talk marketing at all.
Yeah, we can talk marketing. Yeah. Sure.
Because I'm actually looking for advice on this. If you got any ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have some massive fleshed out marketing strategy because again, I know this wasn't the book to put all my eggs in one basket on. I know there's better books in me, but I have I work for Spotify. I have a lot of connections in podcasting. I know a lot of people with big followings, so just asking them to tweet out the book or to talk about it on their podcast or to do social media posts about it, with the book prominently featured. Anytime someone bought the book and tagged me with a picture of the book, I shared that on my Instagram. I put out a lot of social media videos on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube Shorts, reading excerpts from the book. So it was really just a pretty just self-made strategy, and it's still going on. It's something that I'll market for a long time. I don't think you ever really stop marketing a book once it's already out into the world. So I'll continue doing it, send out a bunch of emails, hey, to this podcast or to this newspaper, this publication. You hear back from some, you don't hear back from a lot. That's just the name of the game, no matter who you are. A couple articles, a lot of interviews done. I've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed talking about it. And it's something I carry the book with me. So that's kind of its own form of marketing. I carry it with me because honestly, I wrote this book for other people, but I also wrote it for myself. I mean, I know all this information. I believe in all of it, but I need to be reminded of it sometimes. You lose your way a lot in Buddhism, which is something that I'm very interested in. There's this thing called the middle path, which is kind of like your homeostasis. And they say that we are meant to stray so that you can practice coming back to that middle path. And so I stray, and so the book is kind of the middle path. This is who I want to be right now. So I reread it again. I open up a passage, and that's why the book is written in this way as well. You can read it front to back to front. There's no narrative. There's no story. If you're a slow reader like I know you guys are, you don't need, if you can put it down for 10 days and then just pick right back up where you left off without having to remind yourself of what just happened. Every chapter is its own new thing. And so I like, I want people to carry with them on their travels, on their journeys to a coffee shop, put a post-it note or write in the margins, and when they're confronted with a situation that they remember from this book, they can go back to that passage like Grudges that really resonate with them, and they can remind themselves, like, you know what, I'm acting wrongly in this situation. I really like this. Let me act accordingly based on what this book says.
Cool. Is that good for that section, Alex?
Yeah, I think that takes care of it.
So
So my marketing strategy right now is I work in a school library, so I just added it to the library, and I just like leave it up there and be like, every time someone looks at it, I'm like, that's a great book. Check it out.
Nice.
The author's really cool too.
Nice. That's great.
So we're doing this a little out of order, but let's learn some of your history here. You said
yeah.
you used to work at ESPN.
Yeah.
And now you work at Spotify.
Yes.
Why did you leave ESPN?
Whew. Okay, so 2020, obviously not a great time. Very tumultuous, especially in the live sports space, which ESPN thrives in. When there's no live sports, your business is going to take a big hit, and so ESPN's did. So at the end of 2020, right around presidential election time, they laid off a bunch of people. Not me. They laid off a bunch of kind of dead weight in ESPN radio, which is where I had worked. I started in ESPN radio, moved over to podcasting, hated radio, loved podcasting, was really happy in the podcasting department. But they laid off a bunch of people in radio. Then they called me up and said, Troy, you're the only person in podcasting with radio experience. We need you back in radio. And I threw a fit. And I was like, absolutely not. But I had to do it anyway. But when they made me do it, they pretty much forced my hand. They told me, do it or quit. And that's probably going to be the name of my next book. There's a little teaser for you, exclusive. Do it or quit. And so I knew from that moment that my days were going to be numbered there. I had to figure out an exit plan. What am I going to do next? Where am I going to go? And so I plotted for about 3 months, and then I left just because I felt betrayed. No one was listening to me and what I wanted. I hated radio. I was depressed, sick. I hated the hours. It was not me at all. I was so much better at podcasting. I wasn't good at radio. I didn't even understand why they wanted me. I'm like, I'm not good at this. Why do you want me? They weren't listening to me at all, taking into consideration my physical or mental health at all, or where my career arc was clearly going and where my interests were. And so I just didn't feel like I didn't want to be there anymore. And I'm not a corporate guy. I'm all about supporting local and small business. And so I always felt a little bit queasy being at ESPN, which is owned by Disney, which is as corporate as it gets. And that was just like the most corporate, unfeeling thing, laying off a bunch of people, which I get. Tough times, I get it. But just to completely disregard me in that way and just view me as nothing more than a spreadsheet, as a number on a spreadsheet, that's kind of where the cynicism started building as well. And it was after that I said to myself, I'm never working in corporate America again, unless Spotify comes calling.
Why Spotify?
Because at the time, late 2020, Spotify was clearly becoming the biggest player in podcasting. They got into the podcasting space in 2018. Up until then, they either started in 06 or 08, but from 06 or 08 to 2018, exclusively music streaming. In 2018, they set their eyes on bigger ambitions. We want to get into podcasts. And then just in the past year, they've gotten into audiobooks as well. They want to be the number one audio platform as well for whatever form of audio you consume. And so they were making big acquisitions, getting exclusive rights to the Joe Rogan podcast, to Call Her Daddy with Alex Cooper, these massive shows with massive diehard followings. Apple Podcasts was the legacy leader. They were doing nothing to combat Spotify's aggressive moves. Clearly, Apple was like, you know what, Spotify, you can take the podcasting crown. We're working on all this other stuff that matters more to us than podcasting. You guys take it. So they essentially rolled over. And so I could tell, you know what? I like working for the best and the innovative and the forward-thinking, and that's what Spotify is. And it's a European company based in Stockholm, Sweden. And so I know their company values aren't so Americanized. They're much more into mental health and looking after their employees and listening to their employees. And like in Swedish, there's this word called a fika, which is kind of like similar to a siesta in Spain, where kind of like a midday break. Let's grab a coffee with friends and catch up and just chill before getting back into the workday. So it's a company that I knew about from the outside that I admired. And I said, you know what? F corporate America. But if Spotify comes calling, I'll listen. And then they did just a couple months later.
You also have your own podcast that you do called Found Generation.
Yeah.
What got you started that, and where's that going, you think?
So I started the podcast in the fall of 2020. It was called the Troy Farkas Show at the time because I had no idea what else to call a podcast. But I just started it just because it was the pandemic. We were all disconnected, not really seeing each other, all of us working remotely. I just wanted a way to have conversations with people, to catch up with people. So I just primarily used it for the first several months as just a way to catch up with old friends, people I hadn't spoken to since elementary school, middle school, high school, people that I missed, people who had made an impact on me, whether small or large. And so that's what it started as. And I know I could just call up someone and do that as well, but there was just something about if I just reached out and said, hey, like I'm going to record this and put it out on the internet, made them much more accountable to showing up and having a quality conversation. So that's how the podcast started. And then over time, it was doing pretty well and people really liked it. And so I was like, you know what? Like I can expand this to just me catching up with my friends. I can add some value in terms of like talking to business people or athletes. I'm very big into self-help and inspiration and self-improvement. So who can I talk to about their struggles, about how they're trying to better themselves, the career journey, the life journey, et cetera, et cetera. But then after a couple years of doing that, there was just something about calling it the Troy Farkas Show that just kind of felt egotistical to me. I was like, who am I to put my name on a podcast? That makes no sense. So then I changed it to the Found Generation, which is a play on words. I'm a history major, so I'm a history nerd. And in the 1920s and post-World War I, Europe and America, the young men who had just fought in World War I, who had just seen up until that point the biggest atrocities ever committed in Earth's history, the most global, big-scale war to have ever happened, like the war to end all wars at the time. And they were so disillusioned by that, the PTSD, they felt lost and directionless. And so Gertrude Stein, a writer in that time, coined that generation of young people as the lost generation. So I thought about that. Fast forward 100 years, when I rebranded it, I was like, you know what? We're not lost at all. We have all of these problems. Mental health and suicide rates are mental health issues and suicide rates are higher in this age demographic than they ever have been before. But we have so many opportunities to be happy and successful, to be a self-starter, to take your life in your own hands. You don't necessarily need the middlemen anymore. You can self-publish a book and no one can tell you otherwise. So why are we so unhappy? So it's just kind of like this little play on words, like, we're not lost at all. Like, I'm an optimist, so you know what? I'd like to think that we're found. And so I call it, put the happy spin on it, the Found Generation. And it's hard. Like, you guys know this. Podcasting is hard. It's a lot of work. It's more than you think it is. If it's a guest-driven podcast, it's hard to book people. People cancel. They rearrange. They reschedule. Tech issues, can happen sometime. So there's periods where I'm like not as all in on it, or I'm working on a bunch of other things. But at the end of the day, I love it. I love having conversations, and I'm really doing it only in-person conversations now. I travel a bunch, so I'm taking all my equipment with me whenever I'm on the road. I recorded a podcast in Miami last week. I'm going to record when I'm in London soon, and when I'm in New York City soon. And it's just fun. I really love doing it. And I love making the episodes and putting them out into the world. And if you told me I could just be a writer and a podcaster and not have to actually work for corporate America, I mean, that's the dream.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
As you get closer to your 30s, what are you kind of, this book is about living through your 20s. What are you kind of looking at for your 30s for what you're going to have to deal with, do you think?
Isn't it amazing to know that the best is still yet to come? That's how I always kind of view it.
That's actually scientifically, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and they're finding that people think, our 20s and 30s, if we haven't made it by then, it's you're too late. But they're finding that people in their 50s, 60s, and now 70s and 80s are actually far more successful than they ever were, or could have been in their 20s and 30s. Yeah,
I mean, we have this antiquated idea that your 20s are the best period of your life, and that when you're 30, by the time you hit age 30, you got to have your stuff figured out. You need to be married, or at least on the track to getting married, having kids. You need to have bought a home, and that's a great investment for you to have. But what we're forgetting here is that since that expectation was set in, I don't know, the 1960s, that the life expectancy has increased. Like, we are much healthier than we were then. So when the life expectancy was 70 and now it's 85, like, we need to adjust the goalposts accordingly for that. So 27, I feel like I'm just getting started. I mean, I've done really well so far, and I'm just 27. I'm like, I'm just making this up. I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm really excited. And within the next few months, I'm anticipating a complete reinvention of myself. And I'm very excited about that. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm excited for the 30s. I'm not looking forward to the perils of aging and to the skin and to people waking up like all creaky and with the knees and whatnot. So I'm very big into exercise and taking care of myself and kind of preventative health measures. Coincidentally, my health is just in the absolute gutter right now. I'd have diabetes and I have bronchitis for almost 2 months. Like, I don't know what is going on.
I was kind of wondering.
Trying.
I was kind of wondering about that with the diabetes. How did it take so long for it to get diagnosed? You know, because you're well into your 20s, and usually that's something they pick up pretty quick on.
Yeah, it's type 1 diabetes, which is the most commonly hereditary. Doesn't run in my family, so if it's not hereditary, it can also be caused by a virus. This hasn't been confirmed, but I think I got COVID this summer because I went to London and I got sick when I was there. And then a couple weeks later, I got diagnosed with diabetes, like, out of freaking nowhere. Like, my body just shut down. And so I think unpredictable COVID, just attacked my pancreas and decided, you know what, you're not making any more insulin. So it's definitely a curveball, learning to deal with it.
Yeah, COVID's pretty scary, just all the randomness that it messes up.
Seriously.
I have a coworker whose wife ended up with long COVID. She never even realized she had COVID. Just as all of a sudden, one day she's backing out of the driveway and she's seeing double.
Really?
And
Wow.
months of recovery.
Yeah.
And it's like, finally, when they finally figure out how to diagnose it, it was like, oh, this is just long COVID. It's like, what do you mean? I never had COVID. Like,
right.
Well, you did.
I mean, I'm wondering. I mean, I've never tested positive for COVID. I just think it's because I'm stupid and don't do the self-administered test the right way. But maybe I have long COVID. Maybe I got COVID in July, and that's why that was the sickness I had. Maybe it's like I've gotten 3 shots. Maybe it's related to that. Like, we don't know. It's scary though.
It's weird how it can just, like, drop on you like that.
Yeah.
That happened to me. Like, I had COVID, and then I just all of a sudden had this, like, massive skin disorder where I broke out in hives. Like, I hadn't been to a doctor in forever, and then all of a sudden I'm just, like, there every month because I'm, like, all swelling up. It was weird.
So you kind of hinted at it before, but your next book, are you working on it yet? What are your plans for your next book? You want to talk about it at all?
I want to be working on it, but I'm trying to surrender right now and focus on my health. Without your health, nothing else matters. You can't get the next book if you die before, if you die in the process of writing it. So I want to be writing the next book, but I'm putting it on the back burner. Just getting better is my number one priority at the moment, but hopefully that subsides soon, and then I can really focus on it.
Big question here. Which company, ESPN or Spotify, is being helped more by Taylor Swift right now?
Oh, gosh. Great question. Great question. ESPN for sure. Yeah.
I don't know. Taylor Swift's music right now. I don't know. It's
yeah. I mean, ESPN, the clicks that they're getting on their articles, that the money that generates, and then the new fans, especially like the younger demographic, the female demographic that is suddenly all into football now, that is watching ESPN Monday Night Football when the Chiefs are on and Taylor is there. They're definitely profiting more. Like, I'm not sure how much. I mean, like, people were already big into Taylor Swift on Spotify. I'm not sure how much this has affected that. I'm sure it's been a bigger bottom line increase than for ESPN.
It's definitely been a bump. I think it's something the NFL probably needed.
For sure. I mean that's why ESPN has decided to pay Taylor and Travis to be in a relationship, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ooh, conspiracies.
You got any more questions, Alex?
No, I think you kind of nailed all my stuff. Is there anything, like, looking back on Surrender, that maybe, like, you left out or, like, thought of later that you would want to put in, something along those lines, like cycling back to your book here?
Yeah, it's more so stuff that I wished, like, wasn't in there. I can't remember specifically at this moment because my brain is fried. But there's just some things I look back and I'm like, ugh, why did I write that? Why did I put that in there? But which goes to one of my passages in there, which is actually inspired by Taylor Swift, coincidentally. There's a passage in there called Cringe, which is inspired by Taylor gave a commencement speech at NYU maybe last year, where she told the students, everything you do is cringe. Everything that you're wearing right now, everything that you're saying right now, that you're posting on social media, you're going to look back on this in 2 years and be like, why did I think that was fashionable? Why did I think that was cool? And so I knew writing this book, I'm like, 2 years, I'm going to regret half of this. I'm going to think this is so disgusting, and why did I write that? Why did I think that? I don't believe in that anymore. My views have completely changed. So there's a couple passages in the book where I'm like, gosh, that's really cringy. Why did I put that in there? But I think if you're really trying, if you're putting stuff out there, I think if you're doing the creative process, like I think you're always going to run into that. I'm sure Taylor thinks that about a lot of her old music. Like, God, why did I write that? Why did I sing that at a concert for so many people? I think if you're really trying, that's kind of an inevitable thing.
So the tough part of the interview is over. There's a podcast I listen to that will, at the end of every show, ask the same 5 questions to all their guests. So we're gonna do the same thing. So these are
like rapid
5
fire, one.
However you want to take it. Just but these are real easy questions. So we'll start off with the easiest. What is your favorite book?
My favorite book is What Made Maddie Run by Kate Fagan.
Okay. Are you a coffee drinker, tea drinker?
Huge coffee drinker.
What's your favorite coffee?
Dark roast, black.
What's your favorite location to write in?
Coffee shops.
If money and time was not an issue, what is the one book you would want to write?
Money and time wasn't an issue. The one book I would want to write. It's more so, I'm going to change the question a little bit. It's more so I would write a realistic fiction book based on a relationship in my life that didn't come to fruition, that I wanted to come to fruition. It's a wild story. I would just change the names, but all the details would be pretty much the same. But I wouldn't write it because I still do care about that person, and I wouldn't want them outed in that way. But I would write that because it would be a really good book.
Finally, what is the most important piece of advice you have for someone that you would want to give, that taken from this podcast or your book or something that you haven't said yet?
Just start. Whatever it is, that thing that you've been telling yourself forever that you want to do. You want to pick up jujitsu. You want to go do a ballroom dancing class. You want to get started on a book. You want to start a podcast. You want to go to the, you want to start working out. Like, just start. Stop trying to make everything perfect for you to start. Stop trying to get the environment just right. It's never going to be right. You just got to go into it and just start it. Just get over the insecurity. Get over the fear of failure. Just begin.
So if people want to get a hold of you anyway, you would like them to get a hold of you, where they can buy the book, find your podcast, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. The podcast, The Found Generation. You can watch it everywhere, but, we like, watching it on Spotify, YouTube as well, and that darned Apple. Instagram at Troy_Farkas, Farkas. That's where I spend a lot of time. And then you can get the book Surrender, A Guide to Living the Best Life in Your 20s. You can get that on Amazon. That's the best way to support, but you can also go Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, whatever.
Well, thank you for joining us this Saturday morning, right before Halloween.
Thank you for having me, and I can't wait to read your guys' books.
Thank you.
Yeah, been a pleasure.
So remember, folks, just start.
And until next time, this has been Bookworms.